One of the most common tactics in chess is known as the fork. Now, a fork is essentially where one piece makes two or more direct attacks at the same time. And essentially what they're aiming to do is gain material by capturing one of those two pieces, whichever one their opponent decides to give up. Now, any piece can be used to make a fork. What we're going to do here is we're going to start off with the two easiest pieces. First we have the rook, and then we have the bishop. On the left, we're going to look at a rook fork, where the rook goes ahead and moves to the e8 square and forks the king and the bishop. On the right chessboard here, there is a potential fork where the bishop can move to the c2 square and fork the knight and the rook. It should also be noted that a piece that is defended can still be forked provided that the piece that's forking it has a lower value. From my experience, those are the two easiest forks to recognize. What we're going to do in the rest of this video is we're going to take a look at some of the more challenging forks, starting with the pawn fork. Then we'll look at the knight fork, and then finally we'll take a look at the queen fork. Let's go ahead and get started on this here. In front of us we have an example of a pawn fork. Now you might want to hit pause for a second and see if you can figure this one out. Now keep in mind a pawn can attack only on the right and the left side. It cannot attack moving forward. And if you look at this picture right here, if we move forward and the yellow spot right there, we won't be able to create a pawn fork. We will fork the knight and the bishop. So in this example, no matter what black does, they're going to lose some significant or minor material here, either the knight or the bishop. And their best hope is to try to figure out a way to mount a strong counterattack, as they cannot defend both the pieces that are getting forked. Now, knight forks can be not only challenging to set up, they can also be very challenging and difficult to play against. And one of the reasons being is implied threats. Now, we all know that a knight can move into 8 potential squares. What I mean by implied threats are that if any one of these 8 potential squares are unguarded, that could lead to some problems. Take, for example, this blue square right here. If this blue square is unguarded, the knight could go right there, and then it makes 7 potential threats. And by potential threats, I mean if black has any of their two big pieces or valuable pieces on those squares, any of those 2 squares, they're forked. Now look at the red square right here, same thing, 7 potential spots that can be forked. And if this green square is unguarded right here, that also creates 7 additional squares that black will have to guard or make adjustments on. So if they have 2 pieces on any 2 of the outside green squares, they either have to guard the inner green piece, or they have to move some of those pieces around. So essentially, just leaving these 3 squares unguarded leaves a lot of potential implied threats that if white recognizes, white can take advantage of those. What I have here is an example of an implied threat. Now we're going to start off with white to move. White moves the knight right there, and it's now black's turn. If you take a second, you might want to hit pause and try to figure out the implied threat here, and then I'll go over it. Now there are several implied threats here, and the most immediate threat we're worried about is that if the knight goes in c7, that will lead to checkmate. and black has to avoid checkmate. So what black has to do is consider some options. First off, we look at the king. Can we move it? Well, no, we can't, because the queen is blocking that lane right there. The next option is the rook. Now, we can move the rook over there, but that's not going to work, because that's going to lead to knight c7 check, or checkmate, smothered mate. So that doesn't work as well. Now we could take the rook and move it over here to the c8 spot. And if we do that, the most likely path will be knight a7. And then our rook is still in trouble. Another alternative is to move the rook to the b8 spot right there. Now if we do that, that still doesn't work, because the knight can just go to the c7 spot, and that leads to a checkmate as well. Black's last option in the spot is to move the pawn to the e6 spot, and that leads to this variation where we have knight in c7 check. The king then moves to the e7 spot, and the knight captures the rook on the a8 square. Even in this situation, besides losing the rook, the king is in a really bad position for black. So as you can see from this example and potential moves the knight has, knight moves can be dangerous and very important to pay attention when your opponent makes a specific move with the knight, as far as what implied threats are out there. The most effective piece for forking, or the easiest piece to find forks with, is the queen. Now, just looking at this chart right here, you'll see the queen has a lot of different potential moves it can make. Now, early on in the game, the queen is not able to realize most of those moves, because there's a lot of different pieces that obstruct its path. However, when we get later in the end game, there's a lot more potential. If you look at this example I have right here, if you'll notice, all the queen needs to do is move forward to this spot right here, and it will fork, do a triple fork, where it will fork the bishop, the king, and the rook. And that creates a lot of problems for white. So the queen can be very effective for forks later, either later in the middle game in an open game, or later toward the end game. And this pretty much wraps up our tutorial for how forks work. Thank you for watching.